Over the past 500 years, as it relates to divine sovereignty and human responsibility, there has been quite the controversy between Calvinists and Arminians. Yet there's this kind of third way that has went under the radar, but has experienced a renaissance of interest in the time that we're living in. And this is the belief known as Molinism. And you're here to talk to us today about mere Molinism. Isn't that correct?
That's right.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, okay, so,
Or John McCrae would say, what do you mean?
Yeah, that's right. He's awesome. Yeah, so I guess if I was in an elevator, I'd break it down into two simple ingredients. So, mere Molinism entails two key essential ingredients. That's number one, logically prior to God's decision to create the world, our omniscient God knew everything that would happen in any possible scenario he could create. Now, this entails something called God's middle knowledge, at least if God is powerful enough to create a free creature, and even if he never does create a free creature. So that's kind of a mouthful. Let me just make it simple, and I'll just say this. The first ingredient is an omnipotent and omniscient God possesses middle knowledge. So that's the first thing. So if you believe that that God is both omnipotent and omniscient, then I'm going to show you that he does possess middle knowledge. So that's the first thing. God possesses middle knowledge. The second ingredient is that beings created in the image of God, humans, like God, possess libertarian freedom. Now, libertarian freedom can be either the ability to choose between or among a range of alternative options, each of which is compatible with one's nature at a given moment. And in my book, I demonstrate that God and man both possess this kind of freedom. Or it could just simply mean a human has libertarian freedom if they are not always causally determined by something or someone else. And then I will argue in my book that God has this kind of freedom as well. So let me summarize that. The second key ingredient is that I could just simply say that humans possess libertarian free will, at least occasionally. And then in my book, I'll support that philosophically and biblically. So it's vital to see here that mere Molinism is not necessarily a soteriological system. For people that don't know what that means, it's dealing with issues of salvation. So Molinism isn't necessarily dealing with salvation issues. It's simply a model demonstrating how humans can at least sometimes be free and responsible, and also how God can be sovereign over these free choices and our free thoughts and free actions of humanity. Now, typically, I can get most Christians, if you give me a few minutes with them, I can get most Christians to affirm what I call mere Molinism. You know, if they take that elevator ride with me, or like when we were in Israel, you know how we were on that bus together, a big tour bus with all these philosophers and apologists, and we'd, sit next to different people all the time. And, and I always said, you give me just a few minutes with you, I can probably get you to affirm mere Molinism. So I can get most Christians to do that. But the big debate then is over if we should apply mere Molinism to salvation issues or not. And I love to have that conversation too, but in my book, I really try to build a bridge between Calvinists and Arminians and show them that we can all be mere Molinists together. So you can be a 5-point Calvinist and still affirm mere Molinism. And you can be an Arminian and still affirm mere Molinism. And then, then Arminians and Calvinists can debate if they should apply mere Molinism to salvation or not. I do, but hey, if you don't want to, I'm cool with that. So anyway, one can move beyond mere Molinism and apply these two essentials to salvation issues or soteriological issues. But I say that's not necessary. But if you do that, then I call myself a soteriological Molinist because I affirm one more ingredient. So you've got God has middle knowledge, humans have libertarian freedom, and then if you affirm number 3, that God is a maximally great being who loves and desires the best for all people, then or simply God is omnibenevolent, then I say if you affirm all three of those, then you are not just a mere Molinist, you're a soteriological Molinist. But I'll just say that a soteriological view of Molinism entails each of those three ingredients, but competing views will deny at least one of those three vital points. For example, there's open theists out there and simple foreknowledge folks who deny that God possesses mental knowledge of possible worlds within his power to create. And then Calvinists and other divine determinists, what I call exhaustive divine determinists, regularly reject the notion of human libertarian freedom, and they often dismiss the omnibenevolence of God. And I name names in my book. And I show how some Calvinists, at least inadvertently, if not explicitly, reject at least one of the omni attributes of God, either God's omnipotence, omniscience, or omnibenevolence. And they reject the maximal greatness then of God, even if they don't intend to do so. Most of them don't try to do it, but I show that they are doing it with what they're saying. And I say, look, we cannot do such a thing. We cannot diminish the glory of God. And if I say, in fact, if one's interpretation of Scripture leads him to conclude that God is not maximally great, that he's not either omnipotent, omniscient, or omnibenevolent, then we can know that he has misinterpreted Scripture. And I like to say it this way, I have a very high view of Scripture, but I have an even higher view of God because I have a maximally great view of God. So with all that said, in the last chapter, I show how mere Molinism, and sometimes even how soteriological Molinism, is significant for Christians who take apologetics seriously. And, those who read my book will see that at least one of the two essential ingredients of mere Molinism, and sometimes that third ingredient also, is connected with multiple apologetics-based arguments, what Dr. Craig refers to as the cumulative case. And so with that in mind, it seems that Molinism has logically consistent access to so many more arguments for the existence of God, not to mention offering powerful defenses to objections raised against the existence of God, like the problem of moral evil, the problem of natural evil, the problem of gratuitous evil, and I know even the problem of divine hiddenness. Molinism has access to defeating those objections raised against the knowledge of God, and does a better job of handling these things more than any other view of God's sovereignty. In fact, I don't think these other views can do it. So while this does not deductively prove that Molinism is true, I do have other arguments that deductively prove that much. But just being Molinism, making sense of all the cumulative case of apologetics arguments, that doesn't prove that Molinism is true, but it does kind of show that it should probably be a preferable view. So I don't know. I kind of went off there. Does that make sense?
No, that's great. And I appreciate you setting the table for this feast that we're going to share together.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video with Dr. Tim Stratton. There is an entire conversation with Tim Stratton and Bobby Conway about the subject of Molinism, predestination, and so much more. You're going to want to check that out. Click on the link right here. If you enjoyed this conversation and you're looking for more credible answers to curious questions, go ahead and click above on subscribe. And we'll see you next time on 1 Minute Apologist.